this video we'll see how the movie Barbie is the most masculine movie ever made. Forget about James Bond, Rocky, and John McClane.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Barbie showcases the psychopathology of the man-child and how this is responsible for the crisis of masculinity the world is facing. In other words, Barbie shows us the way forward by forcing us to look ourselves in the mirror, gentlemen. This scene from the opening of the movie says it all.
Hey Barbie, check me out.
Ken cannot exist without Barbie's look, without her approval and without her reply. And immediately he falls into her bosom like a wounded child needing attention. That whole opening scene here says it all. But we're going to break down the movie into 4 categories and go into the details of the psychology and pathology of masculinity. Before we deep dive, keep in mind that this video is not about feminism. That's because despite having launched Dr. Barbie dolls to promote women's equality in the STEM field, despite even having launched a series of inspiring Barbie women like Maya Angelou, Helen Keller and Frida Kahlo. I mean, imagine Frida Kahlo, who was a communist and an anti-capitalist, to be alive and to see herself as a Barbie doll. Anyway, despite all that, the new Barbie movie manages to commodify the feminist narrative through Mattel's corporate marketing, resulting in a diluted and, I might say, superficial version of what the feminist movement represents. But we're not talking about that today. Actually, this video is not about Barbie at all. This video is all about Ken, that mindless male who thinks he's a man. To understand Ken's relationship with Barbie, we have to travel back in the 50s. In the 1950s, the Swiss psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz noticed a disturbing trend, that many men who were in their adult years remained psychologically premature in their maturation. They occupied the bodies of adults, but their mental development failed to keep pace. And that's exactly the theme we see throughout the movie, and that's what we're discussing today. Ken is nothing without Barbie's attention. He exists only and whenever Barbie lays eyes on him.
But it's Barbie and Ken. There is no just Ken. That's why I was created. I only exist within the warmth of your gaze.
And when she does not care about him anymore, he turns bitter, trying to grab her attention by embodying all the negative stereotypes of masculinity. And that's also what we see in nature. Well, not the negative masculinity stereotypes, but the need of males to capture the female's attention. Meet the Japanese pufferfish. He might be small, but he's probably the greatest artist on earth. His need to be seen and selected by females drives him to a very complex creative journey. With a mathematically creative mind we cannot comprehend and his fins as brushes, he embarks on creating a masterpiece as a mating call. His determination is so strong that he needs to work 24 hours a day for 7 days straight to complete his masterpiece, or the strong current will destroy it. And all this only to be chosen by a female. He needs to show her his worth. And that's something we see throughout the animal kingdom. Male gorillas beating their chest to show their strength. Male birds spreading their feathers to show how healthy they are. Jumping spiders and their elaborate mating dance. Every male tries so hard to grab the female's attention. So, this is what nature shows us, that the female is the one who selects. The female is the one who decides the course of the future generations, because if you really think about it, every rejection a male faces translates to the female's decision that the male's genes are not worthy to pass on to the next generation. Now make a pause here and deeply think about that. Think of all the existential crisis, the self-doubt, the guilt trips a female can inflict on a male by simply rejecting him. And it's the same pattern we see in the Barbie movie. Ken's existence revolves around Barbie's acknowledgement. He's not even her proper boyfriend, and he follows her from Barbie land to the real world as she tries to understand her purpose in life. Along the way, Barbie loses her interest in Ken, and Ken is facing the same dilemma all the generations of men have faced when rejected by a woman. The dilemma is simple, and it's this: do I turn inward to better myself and become the best man I can be? Or do I turn bitter and resentfully become something that degrades masculinity to the lowest common denominator? Well, Ken chooses the second path, as we see him transform from Barbie's needy admirer to a braggy macho doofus as he throws himself into how he thinks a real man should behave. This exact behavior is what encapsulates the crisis of masculinity we're facing. And in contrast to the feminist narrative that we need less masculinity to solve that issue, I will argue in the rest of this video that we need more masculinity, but more true masculinity, now more than ever. The type of mature masculinity, that type that teaches us to be better men and at peace with our own masculine power, so that we do not project our anxieties as dominating, disempowering behavior onto other people. What we need is more man psychology. But what does this really mean? Okay, real quick, if you're watching this video, then you're probably someone like me who sees that this crisis of masculinity is real. See, the number one reason this crisis is here, as we're going to see later in the video, is because of the way we relate to our fathers. From the very first childhood experiences we have with our fathers, we construct a perception about the world and how we as men especially relate to it. One of the recent revolutions in childhood psychology is the understanding of how children relate to their parents and how this relationship shapes the kids' perception and how this perception carries throughout their lives. So if you want to learn to understand childhood psychology and raise securely attached children, or if you want to know more about your own childhood and how it shaped the relationships that you have, I created this online program on understanding childhood psychology. In the 12 lessons of the course, we explain how children attach to their parents and how these attachment styles define all the relationships throughout life. We deep dive into how children develop their sense of self and identity and how their mind works. I'm not gonna go into more details as I want to get back to the video, but if you feel interested in understanding childhood psychology, I'll leave a link in the description below. Let's go back now to that Swiss psychologist. Von Franz suspected that what she called the problem of the pure Aternus, in mythology this is a child god who is eternally young, would spread around the world and touch more and more people over the next decades. The things that she said have turned out to be incredibly accurate, especially for men in the Western world. And this is the idea that Ken also embodies, the man-child. Many young men are struggling today in many societies. Men are having huge problems in school. Men are having very big problems with their friends and social lives. Men are having many problems with their faith in themselves and the loss of purpose, with money and with their sexuality. Men are becoming non-entities. And the thing with non-entities is that they can amount to something only in relation with something else. In this case, Ken can only amount to something if Barbie only loved him. He's defining himself through the eyes of someone else. He doesn't have enough man psychology. But what exactly is man psychology? How can we define it? Throughout the centuries, manhood was something you earn because you're good enough. Real manhood is different from physical maleness. It's not about muscles and showing off. Manhood is not a natural state that happens when a boy's body matures, but rather an artificial state that boys must fight hard to achieve. But why do most cultures think that men are made rather than born? Well, to understand this, we need to examine what is perceived as the biggest threat to manhood across cultures. And that is, according to many psychoanalysts, the psychological regression. The concept of psychological regression in Barbie movie can be understood only by this one sentence America Ferrara says.
You have to be their mommies, but not remind them of their mommy. You have to be their mommies, but not remind them of their mommy. Remind them of their mommy.
Now let's break down what psychological regression is. The first years of a human's life are spent in a prolonged condition of dependency on the mother, in contrast to other animals who enter this world with some degree of autonomy. In the first year of life, the baby might be considered to be psychologically in the mother, as the closeness required for the infant to have a sense of attachment is fully attuned to the mother's touch, to the mother's smell and her voice. From the infant's point of view, the mother appears as the metaphorical representation of the Great Mother. She is the child's universe and the giver of love, stability, warmth, protection, and above all, the all-nourishing breast. The time when a child is expected to develop independence and a sense of self is when a baby starts to realize that it's different from its mother and can move around more. This is when the time of separation, individuation starts, according to the psychiatrist Margaret Muller. Even though both girls and boys go through this stage of growth, it can be a bit harder for boys, and that is because for a girl, her psychological identification with her mother can help her go deeper into her feminine identity. For a boy though, things are a bit different, because if he wants to feel like a man, he has to stop identifying with his mother and the world of women in order to enter the world of men. In most ancient civilizations, but also nowadays in some of the world's most isolated tribes, we always find rituals and ceremonies that were specifically designed to promote this process of separation, individuation. The concept is simple and universal. The boy must die to be born a man, and this process was always overseen by older males. But in today's societies, the healthy male role models are even more rare to find than the healthy female role models. Men are entering adulthood without having emotionally and psychologically matured. They suffer from laziness, the need to escape reality, and the desire to always return to the mother's womb, at least psychoanalytically. And by the way, returning to the womb simply means always looking for ways to be taken care of instead of being the one who confidently takes care of someone or something. This happens because boys are never taught to embrace conflict and become self-reliant, which is the ticket for the world of men across cultures. These men children have given in to what Carl Jung called the spirit of regression, who threatens us with bondage to the mother and with dissolution and extinction in the unconscious. And now you might say, yeah, all good, but why cannot girls embrace conflict and become self-reliant? Why does it have to be only men? But that is not the point here. Of course, girls need to know how to embrace conflict, and of course they need to know how to be self-reliant. But this is something that without it, men can never be the men women need. And if men give in to this spirit of regression Carl Jung warned us, they will always live in ways that are against manhood. If this situation is dramatized, then there appears before you on the psychological stage a man living regressively, seeking his childhood and his mother, fleeing from a cold, cruel world which denies him understanding. Often a mother appears beside him who apparently shows not the slightest concern that her little son should become a man, but who, with tireless and self-immolating effort, neglects nothing that might hinder him from growing up and marrying. You behold the secret conspiracy between mother and son, and how each helps the other to betray life. So giving in to this spirit of regression makes us always live in the mother's womb and makes us unable to navigate the world without being taken care of. And if we do not manage to find someone who will take care of us in a maternal way, or if we do not manage to break free from this pathological state, then we embody what Rollo May called the myth of males in the 20th century. The myth of males is the life pattern of a man characterized by two desires. One desire is to be admired by women, and the other desire is to be taken care of by the same women. The first desire leads to machismo behavior, a braggart. He swaggers and is grandiose. But all of this apparent power is in the service of pleasing the woman, the figurative queen, in order that the second desire be satisfied. These two desires are contradictory. The woman is the one who holds the final judgment and, correspondingly, the power over him. No matter how much he appears to be the swaggering master with his various women, he is in reality a slave serving the queen. His self-esteem and his self-image depend upon her smile, her approval. Now, to understand how not having a father affects the way weak men grow up, we need to learn more about parenting and initiation. Mothers and fathers play very different roles in a child's life, and the loss of one can leave a vacuum that affects the child's growth into adulthood. Mothers have historically been the primary caretakers. They give their child comfort, care, and emotional support. This strong connection creates a strong emotional bond, which is sometimes called a mother complex. Fathers, on the other hand, have a different job. They have always been seen as providers, guardians, and guides. Their job is to help the child stop being dependent on the mother and grow up to be a self-sufficient, useful adult. Throughout history, many societies have understood that a boy needs to grow up and be independent from his mother. Rite of passage ceremonies were popular and were usually led by older men or cultural fathers. In these ceremonies, there was a symbolic death and a return that marked the end of childhood and the start of adulthood. Young men were taught to be wise and independent, and then they were sent into the unknown to prove themselves. But in the modern West, we do not have these kinds of rituals of passage. We depend on our fathers to show us how to become adults, but not all dads are ready to do this. Now, for dads to be good guides for their kids, they need to be strong, independent, and emotionally present. They need to show by example that there is more to life than the comforts of childhood. And many fathers nowadays simply do not know how to do that. They do not know how to show their boys that there is something worth fighting for. And that's because they themselves have been victims of this psychological regression we spoke about earlier. Now, combine that with a society that is obsessed with victimizing manhood, a society obsessed with labeling all masculinity as toxic and promoting that the only way for a female to be independent is to be anti-male, and there you have the perfect recipe for the emergence of Ken. When society fails to provide the necessary guidance for boys to become men, we risk the development of weak men who struggle with maturity, independence, and purpose in life. This is a reminder that the role of fathers is essential in shaping the future of our men. Studies have shown that growing up without a father could permanently alter the structure of the brain and produce more children who are more aggressive and angry. The strongest predictor of whether a person will end up in prison is that they were raised by a single parent. 60% of rapists, 63% of all youth suicides, 70% of all teen pregnancies, 71% of all adolescent chemical substance abusers, 72% of juvenile murderers, 80% of all prison inmates, and 90% of all homeless and runaway children came from single mother homes. That's what fatherlessness does to our society. Sons also need to watch their father in the world. They need him to show them how to be in the world, how to work, how to bounce back from adversity. They need the activation of their inherent masculinity, both by outer modeling and by direct affirmation. Many people are going through a lot of pain because we live in this age of the absent father. We expect young men to live the pleasures of home, get over the mother complex, and make a life worth living without the emotional support of a father. And don't get me wrong here, there are many men who manage to overcome this, at a great cost of course. But the majority of men facing this issue do not do that well in life. I mean, look at Ken. He's our protagonist here. Look at Ken and ask yourself, if you're a man, would you like to be like Ken? And if you're a woman, would you like a man like Ken next to you? So that's what the movie Barbie represents for me. It's not about the movie's woke culture extremities. It's not about the distorted version of feminism the movie portrays. For me, this movie highlights the crisis of masculinity we're facing these days. We see Ken seeking approval and attention, and when he doesn't get it, he demands it. But is this the model of masculinity we want to follow? So another question becomes, okay, good, what do we do about it? Now, if you want me to make another video with ideas on how to overcome the crisis of masculinity, subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below. Leave a comment on what you think about the crisis of masculinity or what you think about the movie. Till next time, try to always question everything, especially your thoughts, and always ask yourself, what makes me do the things I do? I'm Dimitris and I share insights and tools on how to design a well-lived life.